Hello, Tov, everyone. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset, therefore it must be. Zeyde Story Corner, of course. What else would you be here for, right? Okay, let's see who we have in the chat room tonight. We have Mendel is in there, and Veronica, and Regina, and Marilyn. Good to see you, Marilyn. It's been too long. Okay, so it's kind of weird that, yeah, it was kind of weird. We were having a lot of trouble connecting today for some reason. Yeah, YouTube was having emotional issues. So there. Okay, so tonight we have a long story. This is going to be the last story from the book that we were reading. And then we are going to take a little break. And then we're going to find some more stories, and then we will come back. Okay? So this story, we will probably go straight through tonight. It's kind of a long one. So this story is called King Alexander's Adventure. Okay, so we begin with part one of the story. It's called Division of Victory. Okay, more than 2,000 years ago, there lived a king in the land of Macedonia who was a great conqueror. And when his son Alexander was born, the soothsayers and the priestesses of the temples predicted that he would be a great warrior. Alexander was a wonderful boy. And his father, King Philip, was very proud of him. When he tamed a spirited horse which nobody else could manage. The wisest philosopher of the day were Alexander's teachers, and when he was only 16 years of age, Philip left him in charge of the country when he went to subdue Byzantium. Alexander was only 20 when he ascended the throne. But before then, he had suppressed a rebellion and had proven himself that he possessed an exceptional daring and courage. I shall conquer the whole world, he said. And although he only reigned 13 years and died at the age of 33, he accomplished his ambition. All the countries which were then known had to acknowledge his supremacy. King Alexander was a drunkard and very cruel, but he treated the Jews kindly. When they heard he had been victorious over Darius, king of Persia, who was their ruler, and that he was marching on Jerusalem, they became seriously alarmed. Jeduah, the high priest, Yehudah, the high priest, however, counseled the people to welcome Alexander with great ceremony. All the priests and the Leviim donned their most gorgeous robes. The populace put on their holiday garb, and the streets of the city were gaily decorated with many colorful banners and garlands of flowers. The night before Alexander arrived at the head of his army, a long procession was formed of the priests and the Leviim and the elders of the city, each carrying a lighted torch. At the gate of the city, they awaited the approach of the mighty warrior. In the early morning, before the sun had risen, Alexander made his appearance and was astonished at the magnificent spectacle which met his gaze. At the head of the procession stood none other than the high priest in his shining white robes with the jewels of the ephod glittering on his breast. Now, the Sefer HaAgadah tells us that he was not wearing the actual robes, that he was wearing a replica of the robes, so that those robes were not supposed to leave the Beit HaMikdash. So, anyway, so back to the story. To the surprise of his generals, Alexander descended from his horse and bowed low before the high priest. Can you imagine that? That must have been a big surprise, eh? Like unto an angel dost thou appear to me, he said. Let thy coming bring peace, replied Yehudah. Parmino, the chief of Alexander's generals, had promised the soldiers a rich store of plunder in Jerusalem, and he approached the king and said, Wherefore do you honor this priest of the Jews above all men? I will tell thee, answered Alexander. In dreams I have often seen this dignified priest. Ever he bade me be of good courage, and always did he predict victory for me. Shall I not pay homage to my guardian angel? Turning to the priest, he said, Lead me to your temple, that I may offer up thanksgiving to the God of my guardian angel. It was now daylight. The priest walked in procession before King Alexander, past cheering multitudes of people. At the temple, the king removed his sandals, but the priest gave him a pair of jeweled slippers, fearing that he might slip on the pavement. Remember, it's polished marble, the pavement was, and very slippery. The king was pleased with all that he saw and desired that a statue of himself, or a portrait, should be placed in the holy building. That may not be done, replied the high priest, but in honor of thy visit, all the boys born in Jerusalem this year shall be named Alexander. It is well, said the king, much pleased. Ask of me what you will, and if it is in my power, I shall grant it. Mighty monarch, said Yehudah, my desire not but to be permitted to serve our God according to our laws. Permit us to practice our religious observances free and unhindered. Grant also this privilege to the Jews who dwell in thy dominion, and we shall ever pray for thy long life and triumph. It is but little that ye ask, replied the king, and that little is easily granted. The people cheered loudly when they heard the good news, and many Jews enrolled themselves in the army. Alexander stayed some time in Jerusalem, and messengers arrived from Canaan to ask him to compel the Jews to restore them their land. It is written in the book of Moshe Rabbeinu, they said, that Canaan and its boundaries belong to the Canaanites. Gibeah, a hunchback, undertook to answer. It is also written in the book of Moshe that he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant shall he be unto his brethren." The property of a slave belongs to his master, does it not? Therefore, Canaan is ours. Alexander gave the envoys of Canaan 3 days in which to reply to this, but they fled from Jerusalem. Messengers from Mitzrayim next came, asking for the return of the gold and the silver taken by the Israelites from the land of Paro. "What says Gibeah to this?" asked Alexander. "We shall return the gold and silver," answered the hunchback, "when we have been paid for the many years of labor our ancestors did in Mitzrayim." "Truly a wise answer," said Alexander, and he gave Mitzrayim 3 days to consider it. But they also fled. When Alexander left Jerusalem, he sought the advice of the wise men of Israel. "I desire," he said, "to conquer the land beyond the mountains of darkness in Africa. It is also my wish to fly above the clouds and behold the heavens, and also to descend into the depths of the sea and gaze with mine own eyes on the monsters of the deep." How to accomplish these things he was instructed by the wise men, but they warned him, "Never enter Babylon. For shouldest thou ever enter the city of Babylon," they said, "thou wilt assuredly die." Alexander thanked them for their advice and warning, and set forth on his adventures. Part 2. The Land of Darkness and the Gate of Paradise. After many days, Alexander came to the mountain of darkness. Acting on the advice of the wise man, he provided himself with asses from the land of Libya, for they have the power of seeing in the dark, and also with a cord of great length. Mounted on the asses, he and his men plunged into the realms of darkness, unwinding the cord as they went, so they might find their way back with it. Smart thinking, huh? Around them was blackest darkness, and a silence that inspired the men with awe. The asses, however, picked their way through the tall trees that grew so high and so thick that not the least ray of light could penetrate it. How many days they traveled thus they knew not, for day and night were alike. The men slept when they were tired, ate when they were hungry, and trusted to the asses and the cord. At last, when they emerged into the light, they were almost blinded by the sun, and it was some time before they could see properly. Then, to their great astonishment, they found that there were no men in the land, only women, tall and finely proportioned, clothed in skins, and armed with bows and arrows. "Who are ye?" asked Alexander. "We are the Amazons, women who are skilled in war and in the art of hunting," they answered. "Lead me to your queen," commanded Alexander, "and bid her surrender, for I am Alexander the Great of Macedonia, the conqueror of the world." Well, at least he's humble about it. Yeah, he's real humble about it, all right. Okay, so anyway, let's see. "I fight not by night, for I scorn to steal victories in the dark. And my men are armed with magic spears of gold and silver, and are therefore invincible." The queen of the Amazons appeared before him, a beautiful woman with long raven hair. "Greeting to thee, mighty warrior," she said. "Hast thou come to slay women?" "Perchance it is you who will triumph over me," replied Alexander. The queen of Amazon smiled. "Then shall it be said of thee," she replied, "that thou wert a valiant warrior who conquered the world, but was himself conquered by a woman? Is that to be your message to history?" Oh, she got him there. King Alexander was a man of learning and wisdom, as well as a great soldier. But the words of the queen of the Amazons were such that he could not answer. He bowed low before the queen, and with a gesture indicated that he had naught to say. "Then it is to be peace," said the queen. "At least, before thy return, let me prepare thee a banquet." In a hut made of logs and decorated with skins, a rough wooden table was placed before Alexander, and on it was laid a loaf of gold. "Do you eat bread of gold?" asked the king, much surprised. "Nay," replied the queen, "we are women of simple taste, but thou art a mighty king. If thou didst but wish to eat ordinary bread in this land, why didst thou desire to conquer it? Is there no more bread in your land that thou shouldst brave the dangers of the dark mountains to eat it here?" Alexander bowed his head to his breast. Never before had he felt ashamed. "I, Alexander of Macedonia," he said, "was a fool until I came to this land beyond the mountains of darkness and learned wisdom from women." With all haste he returned through the land of eternal night on his Libyan asses. But in the flight the cord was broken. He had to trust entirely to the asses, and many long and weary days and nights did he journey before he saw the light once more. Alexander found himself in a new and beautiful land. There were no signs of human beings, nor of animals, and the river of the clearest water had ever seen. flowed gently along. It was full of fishes, which the soldiers caught quite easily. But a strange thing happened when, after having cut up the fish ready for cooking, they took them to the river to clean them. All the fish came to life again. The pieces joined together and they darted away in the water. Can you imagine such a thing? At first, Alexander would not believe this, but after he made an experiment himself, he said, "Let all who are wounded bathe in this river, for surely it will cure every ill. This must be the river of life which flows from paradise." He determined to follow the stream to its source and find the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden. As he marched along, the valley through which the stream flowed became narrower and narrower until, at last, only one person could pass. Alexander continued his journey on foot with a few of his generals walking behind. Mountains thickly covered with greenest verdure towered up, and on either side the silent river narrowed until it seemed a mere streak of silver flowing gently along. And there was a delicious odor in the air. At length, where the mountain on either side met, Alexander's path was barred by a great wall of rock. From a tiny fissure, the river of life trickled forth, and beside it was a door of gold, beautifully ornated. Before this door Alexander pushed. Then, drawing his sword, he struck the gate of paradise with the hilt. Okay, so here we are going to take our break. And when we return, we will find out what Alexander does. Does he get into Gan Eden? Or does something happen because he struck the gate? We shall find out in 6. Please stay tuned. We'll be back.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back, just as we promised. Okay, so let's find out what happens to Alexander of Macedonia, shall we? Okay, so remember, he pounded with the hilt of his sword on the gate of paradise. Anyway, so there was no answer. And Alexander knocked the second time. Again, there was no reply. And a third time Alexander knocked with some impatience. Then the door slowly opened, and a figure in white stood in the entry. In its hand it held a skull made of gold, with eyes of rubies. Who knocks so rudely at the gate of paradise? Asked the angel. I, Alexander, the Great of Macedonia, the conqueror of the world, answered Alexander proudly. I demand admittance to paradise. Hast thou brought peace to the whole world, that thou sayest thou art its conqueror? Demanded the angel. Alexander made no answer. Only the righteous who bring peace to mankind may enter paradise alive, said the angel gently. Alexander hung his head abashed. Then, in a voice broken with emotion, he begged that at least he should be given a memento of his visit. The angel handed him the skull, saying, Take this and ponder over its meaning. The angel vanished, and the golden door closed. The skull was so heavy that, with all his great strength, Alexander could scarcely carry it. When he placed it in a balance to ascertain its weight, he found that it was heavier than all his treasures. None of his wise men could explain this mystery, and so Alexander sought out a Jew among his soldiers, and one who had been a student with the rabbis. Taking a hand of earth, the Jew placed it over the eyes of the skull, and it was then lighter than air. The meaning is plain, said the Jew. Not until the human eye is covered with earth in the grave is it satisfied. Not until after death can a man hope to enter paradise. Alexander was anxious to hasten away from this strange region, but many of his soldiers declared that if they would settle down on the banks of the river of life. The next morning, however, the river had vanished. Where all had been beautiful was now only a desolate plain, bounded by bare, rocky mountains reaching to the clouds. With heavy hearts, Alexander's men began their march back. Chapter 3. The Wonders of the World. One day, a strange rumbling noise was heard, and toward evening the army halted by the side of a river, even more mysterious than the river of life. It was not a river of water, but of sand and stones. It flowed along with a roaring sound, and every few minutes great stones were shot up into the air. Alexander asked the Jewish soldier if he could explain. This, said the Jew, is Sambation, the river which ceases to flow on the Sabbath. And what lies beyond? The land of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, was the answer. None have seen this country. Cannot the river then be crossed? Asked Alexander. Not by all who wish to cross. The next day was Friday, and Alexander waited until the evening to see what would happen. An hour before sunset, at the time of the commencement of Shabbat, the river ceased to flow. The rumbling died down, and Sambation appeared like a broad expanse of shining yellow sand. Tomorrow I shall cross with my army, said Alexander, but next morning the Sambatyon was enveloped in dense black clouds. Alexander could not see a yard in front of him, and when he ventured into the sand, the horses sank into it. Flames were also seen in the clouds. After the sun had set and the Sabbath had ended, the clouds cleared away, the rumbling began again, and the sand flowed once more like a river. Alexander was disappointed for a while, but at last he consoled himself that with the thought that he had conquered the whole world. Now, I must carry out my project of ascending beyond the clouds and afterwards descending into the sea, he said. And he proceeded to carry out the instructions given to him in Jerusalem. 4 huge eagles were caught and chained to a big box. At each end of the box was a pole, and on the end of each a brilliant jewel was placed. When all was in readiness, Alexander entered the box and carefully closed the doors. Thus did Nimrod ascend into the sky, he said, but he was a fool. He shot arrows into the air, and when the angels returned them stained with blood, he thought he had killed God. I desire only to see the heavens, not to conquer them. He gave the signal. The heads of the eagles chained to the poles were uncovered. The moment they saw the dazzling jewels, they tried to snatch them, but they could not. So they continued to rise higher and higher until the box was carried above the clouds. But looking through the window at the top, the bottom of the box, at the top and the bottom of the box, Alexander could see how high he was. For a long time, he saw nothing but clouds, which appeared like a vast sea beneath him. But when these cleared away, he saw the earth again. So high was he that the world looked like a ball. Until then, he had not known the earth was round. The seas enveloping the greater part of the globe looked like writhing serpents. Now I can understand, he said, why the wise rabbis said that the great fish, the Leviathan, surrounds the world with its tail in its mouth. Oh, an oberus. Yes, exactly, an oberus. And then he looked above. The sun seemed farther away than ever. Heaven is not so near as I thought, he said, and seeing himself but a tiny speck miles above the earth, and still further away from the heavens, he grew afraid for the first time in his life. With a stick, he knocked the jewels from the poles outside the box, and the eagles, seeing them no longer, began to descend. Alexander breathed more freely when he was safe on the ground again. But he would not tell his generals what he had seen. Wait until I have descended into the sea, he said. Under his orders, a diving bell of clear, thick glass, bound with iron, had been constructed. Alexander entered the bell. All the joints were then tightly secured with pitch, and the bell lowered from a ship into the ocean by means of chains. Before he entered, Alexander took the precaution to put on a magic ring which his wife, Roxana, isn't that the song by Toto? Yeah, that's one of the songs by Toto. I thought so. Anyway, Roxana had sent him. This, she said, would protect him against the monsters of the deep. Down, down into the watery deep sank the bell, and for some time Alexander could see nothing. When his eyes grew accustomed to the strange greenish light, he noticed multitudes of queer fish darting around about the bell. Many were of a shape never conjured by men. Some were so tiny that he could scarcely see them, and others so large that one of these monsters actually tried to swallow the bell. But Alexander showed the magic ring, which glowed like a blazing star, and the monster darted away. So deep down sank the bell that no light could at last penetrate from the sun. Most of the fish, however, were luminous, and Alexander was almost dazzled by the changing of the brilliant lights as the denizens of the deep swam swiftly around the bell. Shells of wondrous beauty did he see, together with pearls of great size. The treasures of the deep water revealed to him, and he saw that the riches on land were as nothing compared with them. He saw the coral insects at their work of building and of entrancing beauty growing in the oozy beds of the ocean. I wonder, said Alexander, if I dare venture forth and take some of these beautiful gems back with me. The ring will protect me. Alexander was one of the bravest men that ever lived, and he immediately set about trying to open the bell. In doing so, he rattled the chains by which it was lowered, and Robus, the officer in charge, took this as a signal to raise the bell. In his excitement, he dropped the chains into the sea, and they fell with a big crash on the bell and smashed it to pieces. When Robus saw what had happened, he cast himself into the sea in a gallant endeavor to rescue his master. Down below, in the glittering depths of the ocean, Alexander saw the fish hurrying away in great fear, and he heard the rattling of the chains as they dropped to the water. He looked up and saw them crash onto the bell. A terrible buzzing sound filled his ears. 1,000 dazzling colors danced before his eyes and made him giddy. With great presence of mind, he remembered his ring, and immediately a big fish swam underneath him, raised him from the wreckage of the bell, and rose swiftly to the surface. You think he would have got the bends, don't you? Yeah, you would have thought so, wouldn't you? Alexander emerged just as Robus dived into the sea. At once he showed the fish his ring, and it dived and brought his gallant officer safe to his side. I have seen enough, said Alexander, when he was safe on land, more than mortal should see. I have learned that the earth is for man, and that the air above and the waters beneath are for the other and more wonderful creatures of God. He made preparations to return to Macedonia. But his army was wearied with long marching and begged him to let them rest. Accordingly, he halted outside Babylon. Sickness seized him, but he remembered the warning of the rabbis that he would not enter the city. For days he wandered around until his shoulders showed signs of mutiny. Then, throwing caution to the winds, Alexander entered Babylon. At once, his illness took on a serious turn, and in a few days, the great Alexander, conqueror of the world, died. When the Jews heard the news, they mourned him sincerely, for they knew that they had lost a good friend. All that remained as a memorial of Alexander is the city of Alexandria, which he founded in Mitzrayim to stand to this day. And that, my friends, is the end of the story. It is also the end of the book. And it's almost the end of our time together. Okay. So, here is what's going to happen. We are going to take a short break, a couple of weeks or so, just to find some new books, some new stories. I believe the rabbi is actually working on a new book now. Yes, he is, very much so. Oh, will it be done by then? It probably won't be done by then, but we'll see. Maybe we can sneak some stories in. That would be a good thing. Okay, so tomorrow night is the rabbis discuss. Whatever it is they decide they're going to discuss. And then on Wednesday is the Torah study, both of them at 8 p.m. Eastern. And, Parsha Vayigash. Okay, and then Friday night is Kabbalat Mariv Shabbat service, and on Shabbat at 10 a.m. is Shachrit and Musaf service. And then, not right back here on Monday. I'm sorry, we won't be here. We're going to find some really interesting books. So just hang tight. We'll be back, and then we will have more stories. So until we meet again, my dear friends, we are simply going to say Laila Tov.